I'd like to talk to you about 4 key virtues that are outlined in a particular sutra of the Yoga Sutras. So we'll get into that in a moment. If you listen to this episode, maybe keep in the back of your mind, just think, maybe there's somebody among my friends who would benefit from listening to this. Maybe it would give them a perspective and help them find their own path to happiness. If so, please feel free to send that person a message and give them a little reason to listen. The podcast website is beautifulpodcast.com. Let's begin.
This is a beautiful thought.
Welcome, beautiful thinkers. I'd like to talk to you today about having a pure mind or a clear mind. I was reading the Yoga Sutras the other day after so many years of not reading it, and I wonder about this particular thread, the 33rd thread in the first chapter. One translation goes like this: by cultivating friendliness towards happiness and compassion towards misery, gladness towards virtue, and indifference towards vice, the mind becomes pure. Now, I should note that I'm not a yoga expert. I have practiced a lot of yoga, like meditation and restraint and mantra and breathing techniques over the years, but I don't claim to be an expert, so maybe you should take what I say with a grain of salt. But this verse, this translation particularly is interesting when it pairs up these virtues with these conditions. When it says by cultivating friendliness towards happiness. So it doesn't actually say cultivate happiness directly, which is interesting. And sometimes I say part of the way to achieve happiness, the second step, is to develop an environment that is conducive to happiness. That's an important step. And according to this translation, or according to Patanjali, you create the environment within yourself where happiness is welcome. Compassion towards misery. So it's not necessarily, I don't think it's compassion towards other people who are miserable. Or it could be. It could also be compassion towards your own misery. Because I know many times when we do feel sadness, unhappiness, and misery, we're quite cruel to ourselves. So we say, oh, why should I be so unhappy? I have so many things. And put pressure on ourselves to try to force ourselves to be happy. And of course it doesn't work, because like in the first point, cultivating friendliness towards happiness and being cruel to ourselves is not friendliness towards happiness. Can we be compassionate to ourselves, to our own emotions, when we do feel unhappy? Well, the spoiler is yes, we can. We absolutely can, I assure you. I know that part from my own experience. Gladness towards virtue is interesting, because sometimes we get excited when we see things, stimulating things like movies, music, pornography, other things, all kinds of sensory delights, which are kind of cool. But what if we got excited, grateful, or delighted when we saw something like a man waiting patiently, or someone responding with joy, or someone showing affection towards a loved one without trying to control them? And when you do those things for yourself or for others, when you exercise virtues? Can you be delighted just to experience them, just to do those things, to embody those virtues, even for just a moment? Again, yes, you absolutely can. I'll tell you from my own experience, you can be delighted to see virtue. And the next part, it says indifference towards vice. Actually, I looked that up. The word in Sanskrit is upeksha. And you look at the Wikipedia article on upeksha, it specifically says upeksha does not mean indifference. So a different translation is equanimity or even-mindedness. So I was wondering about that because, of course, some people won't necessarily take a holy attitude, but they take a holier-than-thou attitude. So it's like judging other people for their vices or judging themselves for their vices. And instead, we can be even-minded about it. If we do see a vice, we don't have to be perturbed by it. We don't have to be bothered by it. We don't have to judge ourselves. We can just continue on. In that case, I say, well, indifference, in a way, it's an interesting way to translate that, even though some people say it's technically not correct. But it is interesting because what if you just said, oh yes, there is vice, and it doesn't bother me at all. And the reason people say that indifference isn't a correct translation is because indifference can be like, oh, I don't care, I'm not bothered, I'm not going to do this or that. That's like bordering on apathy. So that's the important distinction. So upeksha is not apathy, but even-mindedness. Now, I'm trying to imagine what a person would be like if they had these four qualities: friendliness towards happiness, compassion towards the misery of others and themselves, gladness or delight towards virtue, and equanimity towards vice. I was saying that person would be approximating a saint. But yet, to look at all of these qualities individually, there's none of them which is without our grasp. We're perfectly capable of attaining each of these. What a wonderful world it would be if we took a little time to cultivate those traits and develop a pure or clear mind. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for putting the work and letting go of those parts of yourself that no longer serve you. Moving towards a greater version of yourself and clearing your mind. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
A beautiful thought.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to support the podcast and get early access to episodes as I record them, or many episodes in advance, perhaps even weeks or months in advance, you can do that by subscribing on Patreon. The lowest tier is just $3, so you can get access to those episodes. Head over to beautifulpodcast.com and you'll see the link up the top. Thank you and have a wonderful day.